All right, Sean, thank you very much for taking a few minutes. We're going to kick things off with one of your favorite former players. At least I like to believe he was a favorite former player. Lance Moore, a Super Bowl champion like you, is going to start our questioning right now.
First and foremost, Coach, man, good to see you. Obviously, a pleasure to have you here. And these guys obviously wanted me to ask, an icebreaker type question. So I'm just going to dive right in. And we've seen just a lot of undisciplined football from the Saints this year. Penalties, turnovers, mental errors, those types of things. As the former head coach here, how does that make you feel when you watch that type of ball being played by your former team?
Yeah. Well, first off, Lance is definitely one of my most favorite players. And most fans have a vision for a player, but probably one of the smartest players I've ever coached. And that's why that relationship with he and Drew works so well, because they'd always seem to be on the same page. And I might send in a pass pattern and get something entirely different. And Lance and Drew knew the adjustment and no one else did. And it was one of those, coach, when you scream, what are they doing? And then you're like, extra point, go on in, and you're like, you're upset, but then you're like glad. And so it's great to be on. I'm a fan just like you guys when we watch our team. And I say that I'm not able to see the games as closely maybe as you all are, because we're usually in a green room with 8 or 9 of them on. But I would say this, and I think Dennis hit this right on the head the other day. We're 6 weeks in, and man, I feel like the Saints have got company. They've got company in the Rams. They've got company with the Packers. They've got company with Tampa Bay. There's a number of these teams that we kind of have an expectation for, a certain level of performance for. And we always talked about when the season began, prior to the start of the season, you're a little bit like a horse with blinders. So throughout the spring and training camp, you're competing to get better, but you don't know how the 31 other teams are doing. And then week 1 comes and week 2 comes, and slowly the blinders fall back. And so, look, the bad news is our turnover margin is not where we want it to be. Our takeaway numbers aren't where we want it to be. Our giveaways aren't where we want them to be. And yet all the other horses in the field, the other teams, are still right there kicking up dirt. And now we're in a race to get that corrected. And I would say these next 3 to 4 weeks, there's certainly got to be that sense of urgency, regardless of who's playing, because everyone's dealing with injury. But the discipline that you guys allude to, those are things that we can clean up, and Dennis will clean up. And so I think this month of October into early November here, these next 3 to 4 games are critical, because now you don't have that margin for error. You've used that up here in September. And obviously, when I watch any game, last night even, you get a little frustrated when you see certain things, I mean, the Chargers are in the red zone, and there's 50-some seconds left. They're going to kick a field goal and go in at halftime up 3. And it's 3rd and like 17. And, Joe Lombardi and I are very close. He's the offensive coordinator there. And I'm thinking, here comes a draw, maybe a one-back run. Denver's out of timeout, so they're going to bleed that clock down to, 15 seconds, 18 seconds, kick the field goal, go in 3. Instead, they throw a ball that goes incomplete and kick the field goal, but then Denver marches down and scores 3 points. And those are the things that, as I watch from afar, that frustrate you sometimes. And look, sometimes maybe it's just the newness of a staff, but I think certainly New Orleans has company with this issue. Now, if we don't want to be in the masses, we want to be ahead of that. And that's why I think it's important that it gets cleaned up quickly.
Sean, I guess it's my turn. Let me ask you a question about Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Okay?
Sure.
After my 11th season with the Saints. I left the team, took a year off and worked for NBC, which I enjoyed doing. And then after that 1 year, I had an opportunity to go back and coach again with the Colts, which I did. And I'm kind of curious, and I'm not the media, so you don't have to be worried about this, about what your thoughts are right now. Do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you miss coaching? Would you like to go back at this stage, or maybe just kind of waiting to see what happens, or whatever? What's kind of going on with Sean?
Yeah, listen, great question. And I would say, man, first off, the thing you miss, and Coach, you know this, Lance, you as well, you miss the daily camaraderie of your teammates and your coaches in that locker room. And it's such a unique environment you get to work in, where, I mean, you're with those people more than anyone else in your life, you know, and all of a sudden that gets quiet. Like, I can't wait for Sundays because, you know, I get to hang out with Charles Woodson or Howie or Michael Strahan or Jimmy. I mean, that becomes your team on Sundays, and you look forward to that. Now back to, look, at some point I think I'm going to coach again, but I'm going to be smart relative to, you know, the decision, because you guys see it. There's a handful of teams that certainly have the strength you need through ownership, front office, head coach, and that communicate. And you don't take that for granted. I felt like our setup in New Orleans was as functional and smooth, and not because I had a lot of it. It was just clear, and there wasn't any gray area. Mickey and I are closest of friends, and so, man, when you have that type of relationship, I think the worst thing that could happen is ending up somewhere else and looking around thinking, man, what did I just do? Can this team even win? Because I believe there's a lot of dysfunctional teams in our league. And although they can win on Sunday, I've said this before, that there's a number of them that are never going to win the Super Bowl with their current status. Now, that can change. And so it would have to be the right situation. And I do enjoy what I'm doing now. I've never lived in California. It's pretty nice. I gotta say, it's 75 degrees. Lance, you know this, and Coach, yourself, even being on the West Coast, it's unbelievable when you start getting accustomed to sun every day. Like, it rained the other day here, and everyone was up in arms. They get 3 days of rain a year. I miss New Orleans. We're going to come back there for the week prior to Halloween to spend the week with friends and family and visit with people. But I think at some point, Coach, that's going to happen. I wouldn't say for certainty it's going to be this upcoming season, because I can't predict what those possible suitors would be. I do know this: when you do the job that you all are doing, or I'm doing now, and we're still involved, we want to be really good at that as well. That's our nature. And so I enjoy finishing a Sunday, you know, hearing criticism, you know, spending more time looking into a camera. I didn't know I had my own camera until the other day. They're like, yeah, your own camera's over here. I'm like, well, where's the light? You know, there's so many things you don't know that you want to learn. And I'm kind of in that stage right now.
Sean, this is Sharif.
Yes.
I know how much you've helped build and mold Taysom Hill. How much more should the Saints be using Taysom in this offense, considering how successful he's already been this season for them?
Well, look, we saw a breakout game 2 weeks ago. Here's one of the things that I would say that I think all of the coaches there, Dennis and Pete, and you guys watching the games, the one element, you know, there's certain teams that have a physicality when they play. And when Taysom's involved in the run game, and whether you're mixing up play action pass, but man, there is a physicality that's a little different. And it's not that there isn't with Mark or Alvin. The point I'm getting at is you generally get one gap better leverage if you're a lineman in regards to your angles. And so I go back to the Tampa playoff game, you know, where Taysom was injured and Latavius was injured. Those were two big parts to our physical play when we played that team. And so, man, unless the team is in the division, Atlanta, Carolina, or Tampa, so many of the teams aren't really familiar with his stature, his strength, his power, and his versatility. And so it's interesting whenever he has one of those games against an out-of-division opponent, there always seems to be this like, wow, like I didn't realize he was that strong or that fast. And so, yeah, he's part of the ingredients. How much that might vary, but certainly the one thing you want to do when you're coaching is look at your healthy guys for that week, because it changes a little bit, right? Week to week, guys might be inactive. I know Mike Thomas is getting back fairly soon off an injury, and Olave's back. So each week, that has to be in consideration when you're putting the game plan together. And you do think about the touches. And Lance knows this. When you install certain plays, they're installed for players. That doesn't mean they absolutely end up with that player, but at least when you're installing, there's a good chance that it ends up in that player's hands. And then there's some ownership during the week. The player feels like, hey, whether it's the red zone or third down or in the base game plan, that they're a heavy participant. So he's definitely one of the playmakers. And look, we won't get 4 more weeks before we don't see him block a punt or do something in the kicking game as well. That's going to happen.
Sean, this is Fletcher. I'm going to let Jim and Lance finish it out because I think our Zoom has 10 more minutes, and I want to make sure we don't run out of time here. But I will say this. If and when you go back to coaching, don't forget Jim Mora still may have some coaching years left in him as a defensive coordinator. And I can assure you that at 38 years old, Lance could probably still smoke a few receivers in the NFL. He's in fantastic shape. But
Absolutely.
I'll say 2 more questions here. I think Jim has one, and then we can close with Lance, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Hey, real quick, Fletch, did you not pay your Zoom bill?
You know what? I guess not, because I think we're on that 40-minute deal, and we started this at 6:20, so at 7, we're turning into a pumpkin here, so we're on the clock, so to say. Jim,
Okay,
go
Sean,
ahead.
let me ask you this. When I was coaching, you didn't have time to really follow coaches. You followed teams, you followed, et cetera. You had obviously guys that were coaching in the league that were better friends. I don't know most of the coaches in the NFL anymore. You know, I couldn't tell you who's the coach of who, but I've find myself following coaches more. You know, even though I don't have a familiar relationship with them, personal relationship, I just have a fun time watching a guy. You know, seeing what he says. How people, the media think about him, things like that, all that stuff. I really enjoy following coaches. Do you find yourself doing that?
Yeah, and I find myself interesting. You asked that question. It's not an age thing, but I'm right at that age or experience, if you will, where, man, I'm not familiar with half a dozen of these coaches. You know, there's a time when you first get in the league and you know the assistants, you know the head coaches, and you know the college coaches, and you'd say you're 100% in touch with your industry. And then each year goes by, there's another shift in coaches, another hiring cycle. And I feel like in the last 2 or 3 years, you know, there's 7 of them. If I met in a supermarket, it could be any one of the 7. And I would just, the great news about that is I would just say, Coach, I'm a big fan. And that's the cool thing. If someone loses track of our names, they can just say Coach, but we don't have that luxury. But I do follow certain guys. Look, it's been fantastic to start the season to follow the Jets and the Giants. Those guys, have you seen the growth and the culture and the improvement? And you know, nowadays they take you into the locker room a little bit. You get to see. And look, Lance knows this. It's there's a culture you're working to develop, but most importantly, that culture has to start with the ingredients that go into the recipe, and that's the players. And you have to fundamentally say, this is what we're looking for. And although that might be tempting, it doesn't fit our profile. And the scouts and the front office and the coaches, and pretty soon we felt the pressure as coaches to the locker room downstairs to bring in what they were expecting. And then you have the culture you're looking for.
Yeah, Coach. I obviously I was a part of that culture, and I saw both sides of it. Right, I saw the pre-Sean Payton culture in that Hurricane Katrina season, which wasn't much of a culture at all. Then you come in and things completely changed. And being somewhere as long as you were in New Orleans, 16 years. My wife every weekend is like getting on me for how emotionally attached I am for all of the games, and it's been 2013 was the last season I was in New Orleans. And even still to this day, I'm watching the games and I just can't break away from that feeling of us. I'm wondering if you found a way to emotionally detach yourself from the Saints this season. Obviously you're working, so you're busy, but I know you're watching those games as part of the job that we do. So if you've been able to do that and how.
All right. So I'm going to be brutally honest here. When we're in that green room, Jeremy or Bill, whoever the producer is that I'm working with that afternoon, he assigns all of us games. So when the halftime show comes on, they do 4 or 5 halftimes. Fox does, so when you come out of one halftime, boom, you're on. And so we all get assigned games, and oftentimes I'm assigned the Saints. And so I'm going to obviously watch the Saints on Thursday night. And I am like the worst, like sit in a room quietly with the TV on or in that green room, like throwing stuff, getting pissed off. Just I'm not the superstitious Saints fan that I think our city, but certainly, man, you jump and get excited for the success. And here's why. There was so much blood, sweat, and tears by you and those who were your teammates and Coach Moore's group in the 70s and early 80s. And then there was so much of an investment that it's way past a college, a fraternity, a distant cousin, or any of that. This is one of our immediate families, and you weren't here just for a hiccup, and neither was Coach nor myself. And look, there have been some players that we've really benefited from that weren't here as long, but you know what? It's their family too, and so that's the reason. It's that line in The Godfather. I think Godfather 2, when he says, "Just when I thought I was getting out, it keeps pulling me back in," and I think that's what this team does for us. And I think sometimes, as challenging as that is, I'd rather have something that you're pulling for than, because here's the one thing that I miss, and my wife the same way, and she said it to me the other day. She goes, I miss rooting against certain teams every weekend. Like, I knew we wanted the Falcons to lose, the Carolina Panthers to lose, Tampa Bay to lose, and then the other 2 teams atop the NFC race. Like, she goes, that's gone. Like, she goes, I want to root against teams.
That's great stuff. Sean, we appreciate your time and your insight. Lance, Jim, and Sean Payton, thank you so very much.
Thank you guys for having me on and being a part of it.